Farm4Profit Podcast. Take a listen, have a blast. Farm4Profit Podcast. Learn about farming while having a laugh. Farm4Profit Podcast.
Well, listeners, thank you for listening to the Farm4Profit Podcast. We've got a loaded studio for today's episode. I love being in studio. It's kind of nice to feel at home.
It is.
And however, our home feels a lot tighter today than normal. We're elbow to elbow.
I like it.
We got it filled up.
I like it. As long as you don't have your special ice cubes.
Specialized. Yes.
Inside joke there.
I thought you were going to say something about me stinking. I'm going to have to go get a Farm4Profit air freshener to make sure I don't
We
smell
haven't been able
bad.
to work hard enough to stink.
That's true.
It's been raining every.
Neither has it
other
been
day.
warm enough.
No.
But this should be a good springtime episode because there's a lot of advancements in technology, and there's been a lot of advancements in capacity and precision when it comes to working with drones in agriculture. Mm-hmm. I remember, Dave, when you got your first drone, compared to what you're flying today, is light years difference.
It is.
What was your first drone?
It was actually called the Smart Drone. Best Buy sold it. It was a U.S.-made drone. Worked really good. It was one of the first ones to have like built-in features like 360 panorama around the, or 360 not panorama, but 360 around an object and follow feature. But it quickly got outdated very quickly. So then we went to DJI and 4 models since, and now I need a new one, actually.
My neighbors have the FPV drones right now, and those things can move. Like it is just, shoom, they're just in their goggles watching it go around the house and literally racing his son. I mean, it will make your neck whip around if you try to keep up with them going there. I'm just waiting for him to crash into my house because I don't think those have collision avoidance features.
Probably not. No sonar on the
Insurance
front.
claim, or how does that work?
That's a good point. But we're not talking about racing drones today. We're talking about drones and their applications to agriculture. And we've got in our studio a couple of representatives from Terraplex. So you might remember the episode that we did with Danny and Ryan when we kind of learned about them and how they grew this company out of really just kind of a love for drones like Dave's and Corey and us for playing around with them. But now we're going to dive into the technical portions of this. Thanks to your requests, listeners. You wanted to know more why and how and what's the economics behind if this is something that's feasible for our operations. So since we've got 2 guests and one is a lovely lady, we're going to start with Sue's introduction first. You are the chief agronomist for Terraplex, correct?
Yes.
Well, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners? Thanks for being here.
Okay. Well, good afternoon. I'm Sue Brakhane. I live down at Winterset, Iowa. I've got a long history in agronomy out in the field in the central states, mainly Iowa, and homeland is Winterset. We row crop farm and then also run cattle down there, but have had a great opportunity to work in and out of several different operations over my years in the ag and seed industry and equipment, and here we are with the drones.
And she's got her Cyclone hat on today, so go Clones.
You bet.
Very welcome with that.
Absolutely. And second guest in studio is Travis. You are the Imaging Services Director, and I can't wait to ask more about what that is, but why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Well, as you said, my name's Travis. I'm based in Cedar Falls, been up there for 20 years now, originally from Des Moines. I come at this from a little bit different angle. I did not grow up in agriculture and haven't had much to do with it until the last few years. I've been pretty deep into imagery, video, that side of things for quite a number of years, owning a studio, and have moved into the agriculture as there's been development within the drone technologies market. And so that's kind of where I've approached this part of things from.
I like that because we don't often get to have perspective from outside of agriculture.
That's why he was asking us about our cameras.
Beforehand. Yeah, he's like, crap,
This
crap,
is
crap,
junk. 5 different brand users.
Who are you? That's exactly the way farmers would build a studio. It just is on
Every
brand.
color of equipment.
Every color of equipment,
Yeah, that's right.
That's cool. So give us, we'll go with you, Sue. Give us again a little bit of a background as to who Terraplex is.
So from an angle in Terraplex, we started out as with Danny and Ryan when you guys interviewed those earlier this winter. They started out with, hey, this could be a fun idea. Let's go. It could help something on our operation. And we're curious. You know, that's a lot of the drone market right now is it's building really fast. So they bought drones. They started using them in their operations between running them for cattle. They're running them on the row crop acres. They had neighbors asking. And it grew from there, and they said, okay, now we need help because we have requests for spray acres. Can we help spray someone else's? They were working with spray drones. And so that kept building off of that. You have neighbors asking, friends asking, and it's a networking thing. You guys know that very well coming in through the studio. So from that perspective, we now have a group of storefronts, and those storefronts are service centers because that was a huge part or component that was missing. You can buy drones off the internet.
Yeah.
You can buy drones from Best Buy. You know, that's not always the worst place, but if you're learning it, it's a really sweet place to learn it if you have somebody to support it and understand where to get parts. And then what am I doing today? Or how do I train myself to get to the field?
Yeah, I think that was one thing that they really hit home. And it was neat to learn that the service is one of the key aspects that they like. And I know that that's important. I mean, heck, we bought one of the modems out here for the office, and the Ethernet port went out of it. But we bought it out of Amazon, and there's no service for it. And that just gets frustrating. So it's nice to know that you can buy something that you might not know a lot about and might not know how to operate, and now you got help to get it going.
Well, Corey, you think about like tractors. You don't have any AGCO tractors, but there's not really any AGCO dealers
I
around
was just
here.
going to say that. You know, like a lot of people think, oh, you're either a green guy or a red guy. It's like, no, it's whoever's the closest or
Whoever's
the best
got the
surface
parts. Yeah.
down the road. You know, that's the most convenient because unfortunately things break, and they break at inopportune times when you're trying to go. It's like, I need someone here now that has parts on the shelf or can get them really soon.
Yep.
So, I mean, obviously drones crash, but what kind of services do they need beyond, you know, just putting on a new, what is it? What do you call it?
A rotor?
Rotor or
Twist
impeller
lock
or
blade.
whatever.
Propeller.
Yeah, propeller. There we go.
Well, I mean, I think it's like any other farm equipment. Something can go wrong. It will go wrong eventually, whether it's a propeller, whether it's some little gasket. The reality of a situation as a drone is kind of like a tractor in that there's a lot of things that can go wrong. You just need somebody that knows how to take care of the thing that does go wrong when it does. A lot of times with drones, you have little stuff. That's the problem. You have a propeller, like you said, maybe has a crack in it, and you end up flying around and you're like, oh man, it's cracked. Well, it only takes one wrong flight before that crack becomes a crash. And so it's somebody that's like, hey, I can take care of this today. You know, you can drive it down to a close store and get service right now.
And no longer are we dealing with hydraulics and diesel fuel and oil and air filters. We're dealing with probably electronics a lot more. And that's, I mean, you almost got to go to college for that degree to go through some of these motherboards and things like that. So I imagine that's part of it too.
Well, it depends on what the part is. I mean, there's some parts that, you're going to want to repair, and then there's other parts that you just got to know, hey, this is a replacement part. You know, if you're going to say, hey, we're going to deal with the radar system, that's one that you don't really want to be playing with, because all of a sudden, if you get just a little bit wrong, it flies, and it flies where it flies. And that's not exactly the ideal situation for a drone that weighs a couple hundred pounds with load on it. So some of the things are repairable, and other parts are just, hey, we need to go ahead and take that as a replacement and get it back up in the air.
So do we service drones like we service equipment? Is there preventative maintenance?
There certainly is. Yeah, the big ones are the things that you can see on the outside. They are the propellers. You can check and make sure that there's no cracks, there's no chips. Some of that's efficiency. A chip propeller may not cause an immediate concern, but it's going to fly less time. It's going to fly less speed. It's going to hurt you overall in the amount of time that you're spending in the field. But something like a crack is, you see it, it needs to come down because it's really, an accident waiting to happen. Gaskets get compressed. You don't get quite the same level of rotation that you should, things like that. A lot of the other ones you're going to see in operation. So if you have a camera that's down or something, you're like, oh yeah, I can't see. I don't, there's no opportunity there.
What about accessories? Everybody knows I love skid steer attachments, and the only thing that
Planter
makes a skid steer good is every attachment that we
Oh,
can have.
you just like accessories. All the purses
Yes.
you buy, all the.
So like all the accessories. Do you guys do accessories? Like I've seen drone trailers. I've seen different fill tanks. I've seen better cameras, better gimbals, better stuff you mount on top of the drones for carrying capacity. I mean, is that all something you guys do?
There's components of that we do. There really aren't a whole lot of gimbals and cameras that you can add to these. They're all kind of locked into a system when you purchase it. So those aren't really upgrades that exist.
Okay.
But things like trailers to make sure that you're running your
You guys are doing that?
operation,
Okay.
we're offering those, or we'll partner with somebody that is going to offer that as a good option for people. So there are accessories. Depends on exactly what it is, whether or not we're dealing heavy in it.
Do you guys offer, I get insurance when I fly for anything that I do for farmland, and I buy an on-the-spot insurance policy. Are you guys also an insurance dealer for any of your Part 107 extras that have, do you do any of that?
So we are set up in a couple capacities. So from a drone insurance to begin with, we do have some folks we can refer out to say these are some guys that will cover, they'll source insurance policies. What are you doing with it? There's cover crop seeding, there's spraying, which aspects are you using. We also have the camera drones, so which pieces are you working with? But understanding what you're using them for, they can help source through that. So we have some folks we refer to that we're tied to. We also have an opportunity in-house to work with a couple of people we have on staff. Their full-time jobs are getting somebody compliant to fly. So your 107 licenses.
Let's say, do you guys teach?
We do.
Oh,
We have
You
some
don't have
classes that'll
Corey?
put them through.
What is that? Is that a credit card? I'm going shopping.
It's my pilot's license. If I get pulled over and he says, "We got a pilot's license to fly this thing?" Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I don't know why I just looked at that like I
Yeah,
can't
oh
read it.
yeah.
Oh gosh, let's throw our weight
It's a
around.
card member carrying society here.
Ding
Cool.
dong.
It's the cool.
Oh,
kids
it's got your
part.
height and weight on it.
Oh man, you had
Oh,
to
did
get
he
like,
lie? Did he lie?
that's a
I
lie.
think he lied. Yeah.
Survey
I forgot
says.
that Terraplex is it's only drones, but it's all aspects of drones, right? You can sell me a drone and, like you said, get me compliant to where I can fly it and I can use it on my own fields. But we can hire you to custom
Yes.
perform spraying and seeding and imaging as well. I forgot
I don't
about
think
that.
we talked about imaging last time, though.
we really talk spraying. I'm waiting to hear about the agronomy side of the world because really we talk spraying, but maybe how do you know what to spray?
We also talked about what is his name? Cowboy. I think we made fun of him being called Cowboy.
Rodeo.
Rodeo. There it is. Yes.
Yes. See, we're good at remembering things.
Rodeo.
But that's the main reason we wanted to have you guys back on is the questions that we get, Sue, about the myths. You know, this is cool and fun and a fad. Is it going to really hold on? Does it really provide value? So from an agronomy side, where do you see the most value hitting a row crop operation with the use of a drone?
I think there's two aspects in the general sense, and then there's a lot of finer details you can go into certain places. If I look at the way fields are laid out, so we're sitting in flat, black, wide open pothole country for row crop, which is phenomenal production acres, right? We get into hillsides when you get down in my backyard, Winterset and South, we're cattle country. We roll the hillsides and come in some angles. As I look at the flat, black, wide open, you have another opportunity to go in. If you look at these saturated acres, can we pick those out and go back? Do we need more nitrogen in if that crop grows after we get the water off? Can we go back in and do a verb rate recommendation because we still have changes in those fields that don't lay all the same across 160 or 300 and some acres? So how do we pick out where we're spraying? The efficiency, when you talk to guys that are running 120-foot booms on a ground rig sprayer, if you're going that, they're used to wiping out a huge amount of acres in a day. Unless something goes wrong, they've got a large tank on that machine, they fill it once, they run a lot of acres in one swath. On a drone, you're not going to take that many. I think that's the biggest hindrance on the wide open acres. The catch to that is the efficiency of the fill and the change out on the drones. When I take that drone out, I'm going to spray a few acres. A lot of aerial is labeled at 2 to 3 gallon per acre. Is pretty common on the herbicide if it's going to be an aerial application that's fit to do. Otherwise, you're going to have a higher cost, and your ground rig may be your better option, right? Depending, you got to weigh your options. But as I take that out, how do I set that up? I need to make sure that my fill system is efficient. I need a ground guy or girl to put that together and make sure I can change a battery, fill the tank, and roll back out and just keep going. So the fill time is what gets us across several acres. We're not going to cover the same amount in a day, but we may be able to hit certain fields more timely than if somebody custom applies for me or if I'm covering a lot of other acres. How do I trade that out?
I like what you said. I mean, obviously, because it was insightful, but I didn't even think about it. We just got a bunch of rain. And I think that's going to be one of the hindrances that we're going to have here in pothole country.
Yes.
Is if you didn't have it already planted, you're going to plant around it when it gets fit to go. And if you did plant, we don't know what's going to come up.
Right.
And that may be some spots that you can't reach with the sprayer because you can't get close enough anymore.
Right.
And you don't want those to become problem and issues for future years too. So I'm sure there's spot spraying opportunities rather than whole field
Yes.
opportunities.
Or even varied application too over the top of it.
You mentioned labels. I think last time we talked, it didn't sound like there was a lot of herbicide labeled for aerial application. Is there some?
I would say yes. There's several herbicides that are labeled. Now you're going to be probably just as cognizant, if not more, running from the air because you have other people, especially some of the guys, we've had requests, hey, I live around the subdivisions. Think of the west side of Des Moines or Cedar Falls where he's at. We are growing. Ankeny is a huge growth area.
Yep.
I wonder when Ames and Ankeny are going to connect. That's
Correct.
probably in our future, right? But as you look at, I cringe too, don't get me wrong. But there's pieces where we're spraying in subdivisions now that were row crop acres that we were doing before. So do we still have that 160? How do I meander into that and make sure I can get it done effectively? But people are watching that, so you got to be really cognizant. Right now, if I had my druthers and the first thing I would go out, if you called me for acres, I'd love to take your fungicide acres. I have less concern with people wondering what you're spraying. Can I control? You still need drift reduction agents on some products. Herbicides are going to be huge in that piece where you're not going to maybe need them as much in a fungicide application. And again, it's product dependent and mix dependent in that tank. So I think there's places you're going to use them and there's places you're going to have to watch. But there are several herbicides more. Some of them start to get into a 3 to 5 gallon per acre on their label, even aerial. And like I say, some of that gets to be cost prohibitive depending on what they're running before. The flat open acres that you can run a tram line or run the same boom every time as you're driving through that field for the pass, you're not going to knock down as much crop. So the drones give that application later. Your herbicides might be an opportunity. But I have had questions on some pre's. They're labeled in the row crop market. I've not run a lot of them. We still need rain to follow it to make that application worthwhile.
Right. Well, I asked because I think there's a lot of people in my same boat. We pushed so hard planting in the 2 small windows we had to plant.
Yes.
But I think we only had a day and a half worth of actually good spraying wind.
Yes.
Because it was just 20 plus mile an hour.
It was windy.
I mean, the whole dang time.
Brutal.
And now we get rain every 3 days. Can't get in the field with sprayers.
Yep.
Right.
So now we're got corn and beans popping up and maybe need to change our herbicide program. Could that have been a tool? Yeah, it might cost a little more because it's a little more gallonage, but what's the cost of changing that herbicide to something different? I already got it in my shed. Now I got to send it back if they'll take it back, So that might be a tool that could be good.
You bet.
I think, you can tell that Danny and Ryan lead this company with their heart and their same types of passions, because you could have came in here and said, yeah, drone spraying is the way to spray.
Yeah.
And you didn't. I mean, you've already opened the door that says it has to work. I mean, you have to figure this out for your own operation, your own unique setup as to,
Do you think it works better, Sue, on hillsides? Sometimes you get that 120-foot boom, and hillsides don't work with with that. And that's where the other 2 guys are from too. You get over to Loess Hills, and they have more hillside type stuff. Is it better than that, or we're in square flat black country, so that 120-foot boom works really good, and the large planters work really good. Do you think it's better or more applicable?
I think it becomes, you can use it in both environments,
Okay.
whether you're on flat and open or the other. You're going to have more, like say, you could cover more acres, but you've got to have a ground rig. And up here, if you do have 3/4 of the field dried out and the other quarter's still wet, you can sink a machine and bury the tires. We've done it before on many different pieces of equipment in this area, right? But I do think the ability of the drone to maneuver in the smaller acreages or in the hillsides where Danny and Ryan are at, they've got some really crazy steep slopes that go uphill with 8-10 foot high back terraces. We've got the same thing down south, but we're more cut up in my mind if you look at a general rule. So I have 8 and 12 acre fields, and then I have 160, and then we move to another 45, and then we go back to another maybe 300 that might be fairly open, but somewhere there's a 12% grade randomly in it. So just the ability to use them in different situations. I think as we get fields mapped out, that's part of the imaging side. Can we get a field laid out first? And then I know my path, I can get my efficiency, know where my high points are, where do I set up for line of sight? Once we get that base, I think when you go back the second time, it's going to make a lot more sense and get things rolling as you learn how to run the drones.
Travis, when we started talking, we geek out on technology, and we want the latest, greatest thing and the newest, fanciest. When I think of farmers, I think older demographic. They're getting younger. We're doing that transition of wealth right now, but this isn't anybody game. This isn't just young people, correct? I mean, I know that Danny and Ryan told us a story about a guy that was like 65, and you guys trained him or something.
He taught himself, yeah.
He taught himself and came back 3 days later. Like, how many customers do you guys deal with that are in, that thought they couldn't do it?
I get that a lot, actually. I've done a trade show and had 10 farmers in a row. Well, I couldn't figure that out. That's complicated. But I think that the reality of the situation, it's only complicated because they've never done it.
Okay.
You can generally teach almost anyone this technology. It is really not that complex. Now, there are certain aspects where, a little bit more of a technical mind is helpful. But from a teaching perspective, I'm truly confident that pretty much anyone can do it. I've said a few times I could teach my 14-year-old son how to do this in about 90 minutes. At the outside, I might need 2 or 3 hours with somebody else, but ultimately this is very accessible technology at almost any level of the game. If you can run a cell phone, you can do this.
I was just going to say that. You guys think back to when we were T9 texting, and maybe you're not that old, but if you guys think back of just how fast we've progressed. Even like I was teaching my dad how to drop a pin on a field to say go to this field. He's like, "What? Like drop a pin, Dad?" And he doesn't.
We learned that doesn't even work. It's between Google and Apple. These guys trying to find the studio.
Before we jump into the imaging part, like I imagine, Sue, we've got friends that make TikToks and Instagram posts, and they say that they just planted the field boundaries, and that was over half of the acres was end rows because of how cut up the field was. I think if Gavin Spohr and Mark Thomas and some of those folks in that region had these drones, it would be extremely beneficial because, they pull in with a sprayer, they go all the way around twice, and then they have to do 4 passes back and forth.
Right.
But the worry about the shape and the border of all of this can really create an issue.
I think of the distance between, like if you get an operation that's spread out and you're trying to get a sprayer and all the liquid over there, maybe you could just load up with your trailer and, might not spray as many acres per hour, but road time and all that, you might be just dead even.
Yes.
Right?
But I want to know, Travis, why does Terraplex have an imaging services director?
Well, that's a great question. I think that what it comes down to is that as we move forward, we're finding, and by we, I mean the agricultural community at large, we're finding that acres are harder and harder to come by. The acres that you have are the ones that you want to farm, and getting more of them is a problem. And so what it comes down to is you want to know those acres real well. And a farmer knows his acres better than I'm ever going to know his acres, or Sue's ever going to know his acres. But ultimately, he can know them better, and that's where the imaging side of things comes in. Imaging gives him an opportunity to see those acres in a way he's never seen them before, and not just that, but also get quality information when he needs that information. The field's wet, he can't get into it. Well, a drone can get into it. If the drone's on the ground, you've done something wrong. So the drone can get into it no matter what the weather conditions are like, no matter what the kind of the situation is. As long as it's not absolutely pouring down rain, you can get a drone, get some good information, and that allows him to make decisions that otherwise he wouldn't have enough. Well, he would have less quality information to work from when making those decisions. So to answer your question of why we have an imagery director, it's to make sure that we're equipping farmers with not only the equipment, but with the knowledge and the training necessary to get them that information and get it to them as quickly as possible.
So expand on imaging. I think most of the farmers that are probably listening to this probably get some sort of a satellite imagery that, has been given to them, or they pay a couple dollars an acre for. There's NDVI, there's regular just images. What are you guys offering, and what kind of value do those provide to the farmer?
Sure, and that's a multifaceted answer because there are a lot of variations on what every individual farmer is going to want. We provide imaging as a service. We'll fly your fields and give you that imagery and analysis that goes along with it. We also are doing imagery analysis, so the farmer flies his fields, uploads it to us, and then we provide that stitching as well as imaging information, crop health analysis, things like that. And then we also can do things like field boundaries and making sure that they have the information that they need to get their fields, mapped out for whether, even if they're doing a ground rig, even if they're doing it that way, but also if they're running like a T40 or another sprayer, another Agris drone, you can plug that information in to help that process go smoothly.
You said boundaries. You made me think. Corey was helping me with my farm this year and making A/B curves to go around and do all the outside rows. Can you automatically take the information you guys have and upload it to my John Deere GPS in my tractor so that I don't have to go out? Like, Corey, what's your little rig that you made?
The little tracker, my Chevy tracker.
My
boundary vehicle. Yeah.
boundary vehicle to
Got a
go out
globe
and do
on
that.
top.
Yep.
Can you get boundaries that they wouldn't have to go out with a boundary vehicle?
Yeah, you can. So you can actually fly that field, whether you fly it or we fly it, and then integrate it with my John Deere. And
I did not know that.
What it
Connect-
can't help you
connect
with,
directly.
Dave, is swath.
yeah, the swath.
Yeah, the
swap
I
of
got-
your
I got that
implement. Another inside joke there.
yes.
12-row planters, not 24 feet.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Oh, yes. One of those special planners. I'd love if we can make fun of Dave at his own expense for a little bit here.
So I just taught an artificial intelligence class, and a lot of people know, they've heard the term ChatGPT. Okay, they've heard that. And they're like, great, yeah, there's AI. It's going to take over the world. We get it. But we don't know how to use it. So how do we make it applicable? And so my entire class was, I sell farmland. How do we use AI for farmland? Not what is large language models and how do you make music or how do you do this? It was, this is how I apply it to what we do for a living. How do you apply drones to what we do for a living? We talked about boundaries. We talked about images. How do we make it applicable to me as the farmer? Why do I want this? I mean, I know it's cool.
How do I make money with it?
How do I make money with
Yeah.
it? Make it applicable for me.
The images.
I think a couple of things. So that boundary, for instance, I have a custom applicator near me, and we got to talking, and he says, I don't have field boundaries for some of this. And it sounds crazy because we're mapping some in the cab. There's acres coming in off combines. We have those, right? But if your combine heads down, you're mapping. If your combine, and you're still processing grain at the end, or you're putting it down before you get into the pass, you're mapping already whether there's combine grain going through it or plants. Same thing goes on the planter. We plant through some of our waterways, and others we can't drive through.
Yeah.
So he sent me a map the other day, and it was tracing all of our waterways. Well, I live in pretty good rolling country, so we have some that have 6 and 7 terraces per field and 120 acres, plus 7 or 8 waterways that are 100-foot long turns. So with a 100 and some foot boom, he's wrapping around that entire thing to go around our field. It takes him a long time to get started because of that. So if I can gain him some efficiency, that also helps me as the farmer with the fields we have. Can I make their passes more effective? His shutoffs work, and I don't kill off my terraces or the planted waterways is another thing. That's why he's mapping around it. But I gain some efficiency on both their end as the applicator and ours. So that helps get some of those guys back. Some guy, if you get paid by the acres you play in a day, and you're doing it down in southern Madison County versus central Ames area, that's a big difference on the acres you're going to cover. So how do you transition that and make it something somebody wants to come help you out with? So I think that's a trade in money or time for both parties.
Well, time is money.
Yep. And that's coming off the imagery. I think will be an easier load to feed back. We're working on that right now.
Yep.
Gotcha.
And so, Dave, we used to do this with section control. It used to be every so many feet.
Yes.
But now you got individual nozzle shutoffs
just
on
like
these
your
sprayers. You
planter.
can just drive right through the son of a bee and just you can watch them just each one shut off and then turn back on. And
I had my finger on the bleep button. I didn't think you were going to
it's
stop.
not a fun show, so I'm keeping it PG. But we
That's
are having
good,
fun.
right? We are.
Right?
No. But that's a great point. When I think of imagery, though, I'm thinking of, we've seen and heard at these farm shows about using infrared and, checking crop health as we go through this. Are you also offering the same type of imagery?
Yeah, so we are offering NDVI imagery to do advanced health analysis for plants. Now, Sue can speak a little bit more to, how that works from an agronomy
I don't know
perspective.
if we've ever dove into what NDVI is.
So NDVI is, sorry, John's over here standing up, distracting us all. NDVI is, a more advanced way to look at the plants. Now that's captured on the technical side of it, and then I'll hand it over to Sue with a sensor, actually with multiple sensors that capture data in different channels. So your red channel, your green channel, your blue channel. In a regular camera, in a standard camera, it's capturing all of those in layers. So your top layer, your next layer, your bottom layer. Well, because they're stacked, it's called a stack sensor, you end up with slightly less fidelity as you go down that stack. The ones on bottom have to have been filtered through all the ones on top. Well, what that ends up with is a computer's guess at what the final color is based on, it's kind of like looking through water. The lower you get, everything's blue eventually, and then black. Well, with a multispectral camera like the M3M that we fly quite a bit, every channel, every color gets captured independently. So it's got a sensor that just captures red data, a sensor that just captures green data, one that captures just blue data. And that allows a much more granular way of looking at each color channel, which allows you to differentiate things that you would never otherwise be able to differentiate, because it would just be like, oh yeah, that's green. This is like, oh, it's this green here, and it's this green here, and it's this green here, and that allows a more precise look at the plant that or plants that you're looking at.
Okay. What does that mean on the agronomy side?
Yeah.
So if you look at it from an agronomy side and you take that, a good example is if this crop was up a little further, we're just popping out of the ground, but we can take them at stand count and see when they're coming through the ground. Stand counts V2, V3 time frame. You can see those plants individually if you scope into those fields. NDVI, though, is going to give you the color image. So how different is it across that acre? So in this backyard where we have the potholes, you're going to see a more yellowed or a different color zone where those plants are stressed in some respects, or where they're growing bigger. If you're in an area like we are and you get down in the bottoms along the river, those areas are going to be a larger crop. They're going to canopy quicker. That's going to be a darker image on that and more healthy typically. But it could also be the area you need more fungicide in. So that color difference in the field is going to tell you what you may need to go ground truth to figure out what's going on and how can I fix anything, or can I add yield to some areas that need some extra help.
So now I got a question for you. You use the word may need. Is there an if this, then that formula? If it's this dark red, then you need that? Or is it still need an agronomist opinion of how to read those layers?
If we are looking at imagery, so as we take that NDVI, we also have a way to see, are there, do you have weeds? If it's a weed issue and the sprayer shut off and you didn't realize it had a plugged nozzle, something like that happens, right? So as you go through those are going to be more stress crop.
Not to me. I mean, but I just
You guys have
maybe
perfect
Corey. But
equipment.
no, just kidding.
When that happens, those areas are going to show up different too. But if you think about a year where you have spider mites, they're on the backside of the leaves. If you're in a really dry, hot time frame, they're on the backside of the leaves. They're not going to show from the top. The crop will show a stress level from it, though. So you're going to be able to see those areas. Ours would be on the clay hillsides where they typically show up first. It's a drier, hotter area, but they're on the back side, so that turns yellow if you're driving roadside after you've seen a long effect. NDVI can pick that up earlier in the stress time. Do I need to spray? Do I need to? You don't always know a guarantee that that's what it is. If you have a stressed root system and we pushed it, say guys want to get anxious, we're in May, right?
Yeah.
We're not done planting, and that makes the word anxious pretty high on the top of a lot of people's list. We got to get things done. We're pushing corn yield issues. If I stress my root system by planting it in wet soil and smear that sidewall or the bottom of the furrow, those areas may be what's going on. So is it above ground or is it below that's having the stress on those plants or
Right.
the change in the field?
I've always wondered on these maps, I call them heat maps. I mean, you got your darkers and your lighters and all that. And say we're looking at an 80-acre field, and there's always dark, and then there's always light, it seems like. It seems like it's never just one color across, like how you would probably want it. Is it scaled the same for every field that we're looking at differently, or is it, like, scaled based off that individual field? I don't know if I'm
Is the
asking.
dark red always
Always
the same amount
representative
of stress?
this green that we see or this stress, or is it scaled?
Basically, right now, it's able to take, and I think we're going to need to subdivide. We did some fields the other day, and they have a growing crop of alfalfa, plus the winter annuals that hadn't had a chance to get killed because of the wind. We couldn't get a sprayer across it right now. But right now, I'm thinking, can I use the drone image that we took and segregate that out? But I also have forage wheat growing next to it, and then residue for the areas we didn't take silage off. So I've got multiple things in one field. I do think amongst those boundaries, we may have to split that out to the actual crop at hand. So if I have a corn and bean field all in one image, I may need to split that to make sure that I'm not averaging across those. So it's that field and the same base is utilized.
So what I'm hearing is earlier decision making.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
The reason I asked that was because we'll have fields that we have two different hybrids of corn in.
Correct.
Right? And one might just be a pale or green hybrid
Yes.
in general. It does not, I mean, it might be just the same health and all that, same yield, but then you can see that sometimes on
Right.
your imagery, and it's like, so then I don't know what to believe. And
And that's where we're still in a place
Yeah.
where we're going to ground truth. We're at a point we can zoom in on imagery to see insects. Spider mites, like say backside of the plant. Bean leaf beetles, you catch that early morning. Those things are on the top. They're having a heyday feeding in the early season, that type of thing you could see. Rootworm beetles are going to be in the canopy of the corn plant. They're looking at silks. They're looking at tassels. You're not always going to see them. But what are you looking for? And I think it's a timing. And then there's still going to be a lot of ground truthing for a while. But we're getting really, really minute details and a lot of imagery anymore. So as we progress forward, the ability to scout, or right now I have guys that'll call and say, hey, I want to show you something, or I need you to come up. And I said, okay, I can't make it tomorrow. What about a FaceTime video? So we're doing it that way. There's a way to do it and add to the imagery maybe.
So I'm hearing two different things. I'm hearing one is spraying and variable rate. I'm hearing another one is imagery and boundaries. Are these the same drone? Do we sell the farmer the same drone, or do they use the other one, put a new attachment on, or do they need two?
Yeah, I was going to call it a chassis. I didn't know what else to call it.
Yeah, so the spray drone is not going to be the same drone that you are using to map. Now, it can, but it cannot do it in an efficient way. Very few farmers are going to make that as an option. You could map with a T30 if you wanted to, but you're not going to get NDVI imagery from that. It's not going to have a camera that's really built to give you high-quality imagery on the ground. So it's one of those things that it's like, you can do it, you just can't do it the right way. Most farmers are going to be looking at either an M3E if they just want to map boundaries and things like that, see regular images, or an M3M if they want to do multispectral imaging. Those are much smaller, very accessible drones. Yep, he's got one there right on the screen.
So what do we advise when the farmer calls you? There's some of our listeners might not have drones yet. We talk about them all the time. They're thinking, hey, these Farm4Profit guys are pretty cool. I'm going to get a drone. They call you. Do you put them into an image drone first, or do you put them right into the Big Daddy because they say they want it? What's the ticket here?
Well,
hold on. I'm gonna send that to the marketing guy. You guys need to relabel the first drone on your
Big Daddy.
We need the Big Daddy drone or the little guy.
Big Daddy and little guy.
I'm guessing they don't know what an M3M is, and they probably know what it's the big one.
Well, I think that what it comes down to is something that Sue said earlier. The right drone is the drone that's going to work for you. And sometimes that's going to be an M3M. Sometimes it's going to be the Big Daddy, a T40 or P100 Pro or whatever. The reality of the situation is that a conversation needs to be had about whether or not it's something that they need, something that they want, or something that they're looking to dip their toes into. And for some farmers, I've been in a conversation with the farmers like, I want this. And I'm like, I don't really think that's the right drone for you. He's looking at a T40. I'm like, I think a T20P would be better for your needs.
Sometimes it's just an ego thing.
Right. And so it's like, I'm
you know
willing.
what they say about guys with big trucks.
and big drones. Yeah. And so I got, it's like I went into a conversation with them, and he's like, oh, I want this. Well, okay, I'll sell it to you if you really want, but I'm telling you, I think the smaller drone would actually be better for your operation. And that's where some of that knowledge comes in, being able to have a conversation with a real person, probably, within an hour of you, that is willing to give you the truth rather than just sell you a drone in a box and say, well, good luck flying that Big Daddy down your field or doing whatever else. So to answer your question, it really does depend on a conversation. I tell a lot of people, hey, you're not quite ready yet. Maybe you're just unsure about it. Fly your fields with an M3M. Fly your fields with something small, and then next year you're going to be ready to fly with the big one.
Tanner, from the first day we started the podcast, we've talked about building a team. I don't know that we've had the drone consultant on there as the team member, but we've had attorneys and bankers and auctioneers and real estate and equipment guys and agronomists. I think we got a new person to add to our team as drones become bigger and bigger.
Yeah, it's fun for me to sit here and we started a relationship, a working partnership with Terraplex, and I thought, oh, yeah, they're the drone company. And you don't realize that, yeah, they're the drone company, but there's so much more that goes into being the drone company than just selling drones. The knowledge that the two of you have as employees, and we're only a couple minutes into the episode, of what kind of value this can bring to our listeners. And again, it might not be the end-all solution, but it could be a valuable solution. I still remember, I think it was National Farm Machinery Show. We were standing there looking at drones. Corey and I were. Dave, you might have been there too. And the guy was getting ready to order a second one because he sprayed
desiccated.
Yes.
Farm Progress Show.
Oh, it was Farm Progress.
Yep.
And he was saying, I know that if I do this, I know the number of acres I can harvest in one day, and I'm going to have them desiccated no matter what the condition is. And then that way, 4 days later, 3 days later, whatever the wait period was.
10, I think he was saying.
Yeah, exactly what I was saying. Right.
Perfect.
That he can go in and that's what his operation is going to do. He doesn't have to wait for what Mother Nature's telling him this is a part of his operation. And he found so much value in that one practice, not running over intertangled beans or those to worry about pod shatter. And
they were having a plane do it. and the plane was missing the corners and stuff where they had to pull up around trees and things of that nature, and then they couldn't harvest those beans.
Sure.
He said it was a lot more even spray with the drone.
But I know through conversations that we've had off mic with Terraplex that probably one of the first most valuable areas that the drones can be used is for fungicide.
Yes.
And then it's interesting to see all the opportunities after that. But in a year where we're trying to make decisions and want to make the best fit for our farms, tell us a little bit more about the benefits of spraying fungicide with a drone.
I think a couple of things. So you mentioned on the airplane, so they have to come in. We live on a pretty good hilltop and have 100 and some acres behind the house. They have to start to get up that hill, and then when does that kick on? Where are they going? But they got to be above a tree line before they even get to the crop. That's not abnormal in some places. You guys have high lines. We've got house opportunities. You know, how do they get in and down to that crop? So I'm definitely not going to knock the airplane. They do a great job where they're at. Some of those guys are amazing flyers, and the helicopters too. The ability of the drone to be able to drop in. You don't do end rows. You simply go back and forth through that field. You don't have to worry about wrapping around it. The other thing I think is you can get close to canopy on any of them, but it's a matter of can you stay there close to canopy as you're doing, and how efficient is it turning around. If you get in those odd angled fields, that's a whole another issue of what parts are you hitting with that airplane. Do you get the full piece? Beans, you get tall enough. We had not a lot of rain for a while last summer, and then all of a sudden we got a lot of rain and beans grew 2 feet. So then we started to tangle tires and we're mashing things down if you're on the later end of the spray season. How do I avoid that without taking crop out at the same time? So I think there's some things the drones really add even without the weather factor and can I drive in the field.
Because I know you've got a high boy, you've got your Hagee, and are really proud of the work that your family does when you spray fungicide. Could you see drones working in your operation even though you own a Hagee?
I definitely see where it could come in now. Obviously, we've got that sprayer before drones were even spraying, and it has been a nice thing on our farm because we do custom acres. And like you said, flat, black, we can get a lot of acres done in a day. We can put 20 gallons onto the acre of coverage and, fog that on or, feel like we're doing a good job. But I see it. We talk to you guys about how many acres you get done a day, and then one person can run several drones. I see it.
Corey, I was talking with Brody, and I think they're going to put, I don't know if I'm saying this right, but the microbiologics, can we spray microbiologics with drones as well?
And those are like the Wild West. You can do anything with those.
You can do
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
I don't think there's a whole lot of
Can you do that?
We might have to cut that out. You can do anything with them except for
I
maybe
don't know
say
that
you
those
can
are
do anything with
regulated,
them.
is what I'm saying.
So I live close to an airport. I'm not too far. I went to fly my drone, just take pictures of it the other day, and it's, do you accept permission on this? How often do we run up? I'm guessing 99.9% of agriculture ground is not close to an airport, but some of those smaller fields are where that drone might come in. Do you ever run into issues with airports?
Okay, so I can actually jump in here. So I flew, a lot, probably 20,000 acres of imagery last summer, and there was exactly one airport that gave me any problems and 2 airports I had to deal with.
Oh, okay.
So it does exist. It's not a no, but it's a not very often. And we've gotten to a point where the process of getting approved, unless it's a major airport, if it's a Des Moines International or it's something like that, that's a different conversation. You're probably not going to be running a drone in that scenario. But if it's a smaller, like the one I run into near Cedar Falls is Isley, is an annoying little airport that's not actually an airport according to the FAA. I mean, it is, but it's not. And that's the only one that I had any problems with in my entire summer. So
When you guys go to take your drone license, that's the entire test is airspace.
Yeah.
Well, right, because
It's all about airspace.
you have to take that to become a pilot too, right? Correct?
Yeah.
So, that's what...
I'm convinced that's part of how the test that came into being there. Like, what do we want to put on this test? I don't know. Use the regular pilot's test and then toss in a few questions about drones.
It was. There's nothing about how to fly a drone.
Right.
There's nothing about how to spray with a drone.
What happens when you transition it at 15,000 feet? Well, if it's with the drone, I've really messed something up, actually.
You guys help with the education part of it too,
Yep.
correct?
Yes.
Mhm. Yep. We have a full-time, well, actually we have two full-time staff members on compliance that'll help people get with 107s or then for spray, 137 or 137 exemptions.
So when I started with a drone, it was GoPros, and we had to put GoPros on the gimbal. And some had gimbal, some were just hard mounted or hard fixed, And then we got to removable blades and removable propellers, and then we got to shorter legs and longer battery times. And now we have way better cameras and 8K and 4K and et cetera, et cetera. What's next? We added sonar to it, accident avoidance, front, backwards. But if you fly sideways, there's still nothing to help you hit that power line. Just saying.
Hey, that's why they still have mine. Yeah, but the sideways is.
Yeah, actually, one of the first questions that employees got asked in the beginning of Terraplex was, "Have you crashed a drone?" Because if you hadn't, they were like, "We're not sure if we can hire you if you haven't crashed one." So yeah, that power line struggle, I definitely don't know what that's like at all. But
have you put one in the water yet?
Nope, not into water.
Okay. Well, Dave's got you there.
I got you there. It hit a power line, then fell in the water. So
I got sucked into a road sweeper. Does that?
Oh man, nice.
But that's a whole other thing.
But is there advancements that you see coming? I mean, I've been trying to watch, but that are going to help agriculture?
I think that from the imagery side of things, we have actually hit an area where things are really, really good. I don't see a major imagery breakthrough in the next 1 or 2 years. I do see some breakthroughs on the horizon potentially for the spray side of things. For the imagery side of things, I think the improvements we're going to see are faster and lighter and longer lasting.
Because I've had some guys say, "Whoops, sorry." Nope. I had some guys say, "Oh, well, maybe I shouldn't buy it yet. The technology is going to get better. I'm going to wait until it gets better." To the listener that is thinking about it, do we buy now, and then is there upgrades available? Like, can we trade old stuff in with you guys and get new? How's that work?
We do take trade-ins on different drones. Now, it's going to depend on the value of them, too. So see where you're at, and this is technology. It moves fast. It also
or we just throw it away and
upgrades
get
itself
new.
fast, right? So you got to be cognizant of how quick that is. And the thing is, things move so quickly. We're looking at software. Quite frankly, battery life is a huge one people wonder about. That's why we have multiple that we sell with a drone to keep you happy and make it run.
Sorry, Tanner, I interrupted you.
I just want to know what the capacity is currently for a spray drone. How many gallons and how many acres? Say your capacity is of your Big Daddy, right? Is that what you called it?
Yeah, the Big Daddy.
The Big Daddy. How many can we spray in a load?
It's less about how many you can spray in a load, in my opinion, and more about how much you can spray in an hour. Because realistically, if you say, "Oh, how much can I spray in a load?" you don't really have any idea of what that means. Once people get practiced at it, once people know what they're doing, you can get 40-ish acres per hour. You can get slightly more with that on the P100 Pro than the T40, but somewhere in that neighborhood, 40 to probably 50 on the high end for people that have got some practice and understand how the process works. The tanks themselves are 10, 12 gallon. That's about where you're at per tank cycle.
And that's limited by the FAA?
No, the FAA doesn't have a limit. That it's really more about battery life.
Don't they have a limit? You can't spray at night, but some things we want to spray at night?
So that's actually a really great question. The answer is that as of right now, drone operations at night are prohibited. However, the first waiver for that just was approved by the FAA, so that is on the horizon. I know that Terraplex has also submitted an application for waiver for night operations, and I would expect that that's going to be something that's on the horizon as well. So it's a not yet, but not a no, because there already have been approvals, and there's going to be more.
Sue, is there a way, big sprayers and high boy type stuff, rogators, and then, drones. Is there a way there's already a way they cohesively exist, but is there a way that guy who's listening, like, whatever, I got a Hagie sprayer, I don't need this. What's the advantage to them? Can they use it too?
I sure think they can. I do believe there's pieces where, do they need to run the full acre, or are they running parts of it? That's a big piece. You don't want to run a big machine across the whole thing if you can go to specific spots and locations in the area. The other thing would be, I do see a lot of places where the double fungicide or 2 passes, if you get the right weather pattern, where if we stay wet, now we could turn off hotter than sin and see where that lands, but if we stay wet, then do we need more fungicide to control that canopy? That's how diseases spread more readily in that area. So do we do the first pass when the crop's smaller, and then we come back with a drone to keep it off the ground? But I do think they worked in tandem. The other thing is, a lot of guys at the farm shows come up and say, So I either want to get my son or daughter, somebody's coming home from college, I need another income source for somebody that we're row crops, so we're spraying, but I've got somebody tendering. I have a third person that, if they're just plain row crop and they're not running cattle or something else to keep them busy the rest of the day, that's another income source. So do I do a second pass on some fields? And do I go spray the neighbors for some custom acres to make that pay off better?
It's kind of the seed dealership of like 15 years ago. Everyone had a seed
There you go.
dealership.
Hog
That's
or the hog
climate,
building.
whatever. Like
Yeah.
now it's this. So
Yep.
one thing we haven't talked about, and we talk a lot about the carbon markets, seems like cover crops. You guys do
Yes,
those too
we
as
do.
well, right? You've had to see a big increase in interest.
Oh my gosh. I was completely unprepared for the number of questions that I would have about cover crop. Not an exaggeration, over 50% of the people I talked to at the various trade shows, ag shows, were asking about cover crop.
Yep.
It's start to finish something that people are interested in. And the units that we're selling to do spray can double and do cover crop as well.
Because that's our challenge here, at least in this part of the country, is by the time the crop is off, if you want to get much growth in the fall, you don't have much time to get it seeded. So then you can go in and seed when it's still
And that's
growing.
the same thing as an airplane. We've had covers seeded with planes before, and they get 12 rows of the neighbor's field.
Yes.
Or we miss the first 20 rows of our field, vice versa, depending upon where the high lines are and trees are. And it just gets frustrating because you got good cover until you don't. So I could see that being extremely beneficial too.
Yeah, drones are really all about control. I think that's a big aspect of drone advantage is that you can fly what you want to fly when you want to fly it, and you have the opportunity to do that on your timeline. If you need to get into the field today, whether it's for fungicide or whether it's for cover crop, you go and you do it. And you could also hire someone to do it. Of course, we'll do it for you. But that's a big part of why a lot of farmers are getting in and buying their own, is so that they can do it on their schedule.
What kind of weight can they lift for cover crop seed?
Well, it depends on which drone you're talking about, but you end up with a maximum of about 150 pounds.
Yeah. So you probably don't want to go put a couple bushel of rye to the acre with a drone. You probably could, but
Do about a bushel efficiently, I think, is what we played with the other. And that doesn't mean that's the only thing, but the mix is no different than if you're spreading it from a plane.
Yeah.
Is that mix? Because a lot of NRCS programs and things are a mixed composite. It's not just one seed. How does it spread? What's your swath pattern? That type of thing.
But if you could get down to like a radish that's like 6 pounds,
Yeah.
4 or 6 pounds of the acre or whatever, you could probably go a ways.
You bet.
That'd be
bet.
nice. You'd get a lot done.
And they're the same tank. I mean, it's the same drone. So
Yep.
you guys talked about swappable components. What can you adjust or what additions? These are just like a dry to a liquid tank on a sprayer. Now, not a lot of guys change those after those hit the market on the ground rigs, or at least
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
It wasn't as efficient of a changeover, but it can be done. So I can run my liquid and I can spread dry fertilizer after that. On the drones, you've got a dry spread tank. Depending on the model, it has a different way to outlet through that machine. And your liquid tank is the same one. It's a bracket. Undo it, change it, and you go.
Can you have multiple liquid tanks? So if you spray Roundup just in one all the time, or something really bad, you can just keep that tank for
Skull
the bad
and
stuff,
crossbones.
and then
Yes.
keep a separate tank for your.
There's no reason you couldn't.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've recommended that, especially if you think about if somebody's taking off and spraying pastures.
I mean,
spot
some people
spray,
don't
there's
clean
pretty
nearly
tight-
as good
Yes.
as they should. Is what I'm
Then you
getting
need
at.
Yes.
the multiple
There's-
tanks on the
I-
drone that could be like, oh, that's a
Squirt,
yeah,
squirt.
that's something I want to hit with this. That's something I want to hit with that. That's a thistle, you know.
Variable rates.
Yeah.
Send that through the line.
Yes.
Send that through the
Yeah,
line.
we're not quite there
See
yet.
and
but
spray. That's
I wondered if you had that, like a see and spray that would fly over the field, see a weed, just go fly to it and hit it.
Well, we don't as of right this second. That said, in the the middle term, I do think that that's on the horizon. One of the things you mentioned earlier in the show about AI, I think is going to really, really change this market. It won't be this year, but it's going to come. It's going to be a situation where we can fly the imagery drones and not just tell you, where the weeds are, but exactly what kind of weeds they are, and then you're going to be able to tailor treatment for that. Like I said, that's not a this year thing, but in areas where AI can come into play, it's going to be things like that. It's going to be automatic identification of problems in ways that we just aren't able to see. That RGB sensor, the multispectral sensor, the variation in color that it can see is so sophisticated that an AI program eventually is going to come out that's going to say, oh yeah, I can tell you not only whether or not there is this, but it's because you're one shade different in green. I know that you need this.
Yep.
There's going to be a lot of AI learning that goes into that,
Right.
but that is a long-term advancement that I'm convinced will occur.
I think we need one of the wrecked ones to hang up.
We do.
Put it
That
in
would be
here.
cool.
There
How
we
about we
go.
can find one?
Yeah.
A wall of shame.
Yeah. Just
What
well,
about,
if you want to buy one, I'll wreck it for you.
I think of predictive stuff. So I went to a seed dealer and said, what seed should I plant? Because I don't know. I'm not an agronomist. I don't know. I hear some soil samples I had. I don't necessarily know how to read them. Is there going to be drone predictions that are made with AI of sorts that maybe you say, based on what you have, we flew your field, we predict you should do this, 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 and write scripts?
I do believe that's a possibility. And currently we've been probably doing it more off of backgrounding information, not necessarily imagery, where we're taking it from last year. So the analytics out in the countryside on different programs in the base have been there for a few years and been building and getting better. So if we can do that instead of going off the past season, can we utilize that information plus an image of what's changed in that field, or maybe this particular season coming off a wet year is going to look a little different going into next year if it turns out to be dry. How do we know based on yield, based it on the imagery through that field and how it worked? You're going to know how much of that percentage of the field is a wetter area or potentially a higher ground. Those the planters that can put hybrids that are switchable in the planters you're driving, that may be capable of understanding more about what goes in those. So we're using analytics now in the ag community and have for several years. They've gotten better, so if we can roll that to the imagery and tie it with ours, that's even better.
You got me thinking even deeper. You talked to, I've watched some people with drones count cattle. How many cows are out there? Mm-hmm. And I was just thinking.
even do stand counts.
Yep,
Yes.
we do stand counts.
I
Yep,
was
absolutely.
wondering, do you do like how singulation your planner is to know how effective you did? Did I get 35,000 here? Did I get 32 here? Are they sophisticated enough to tell me that?
We can do.
That
We can do
technology's
stand
been
counts
here
and
since like 2016. I'm pretty sure. I was doing that with drone
With
deploy
drones? I didn't
back
know
in
you
the-
could do
back
that.
in the
See
day.
that.
And it's gotten better every single year. Yeah, you can do pretty precise stand counts down to the plant.
Yeah. I like this a lot. And I know our listeners are going to get value out of this show because of how we tried to come up with the different ways it can apply to their operations. Mm-hmm. Did we miss anything? If you think about a customer that you've got and you're like, oh, yeah, he does this.
Well, what I've found consistently is that once farmers have it, they find a way to use it that's going to benefit them. I have seen all sorts of kind of novel solutions to their existing problems. I know farmers that will, fly their fence lines. Oh yeah, this is where I need. This is where I need. They don't have to leave the house. It's February. It's freezing cold. They want to know whether their cattle put down a calf and whether it's in the creek bed or wherever it is. Fly out a thermal drone and be like, oh yeah, no, it's good, it's fine. Or, oh yeah, I got to go out. So there are a lot of areas that I think drones can apply that are not necessarily going to be for every person that buys a drone, but for the person that does, they'll find uses for it. So don't be surprised if you hear about any drone solution that doesn't necessarily, oh yeah, I wouldn't have thought to do that, but I hear about it
the most
anyway.
important one that we haven't talked about yet is making TikToks.
Oh, sure. Mm-hmm.
I want to ride on one.
Is
Wouldn't
it
it
a
They have
drone?
those.
Is it a drone then?
We talked about that. But
It's not
I'll go-
unmanned.
The
I'll go-
FAA will have something to say about
I'll
it.
go ultralight or something, get it under that certain weight, and I'll fly it.
You might have to do some more working out.
Yeah, I know, right?
Or fasting.
That's
So
good.
as you guys think of ways to use it, I wrote down we can upload images. We can, of course, get boundaries, save time with that. Variable rate, different chemical formulas we can put together. Of course, we save time. Save the amount of product we might use. Crop health, we can make decisions there. Earlier decision making is what I got out of that one, Tanner. And then something I didn't think of, custom or side income you could do with that. And I'm sure there's more that you could do with that, but those are just some of the cool ways in this conversation.
And I've had it up on the TV here. We have terraplexag.com, which has got a ton of information. And if you look at it by the time this podcast comes out, it will say which one is the big daddy and the little guy to make sure that you can get that information. But the two of you have been a pleasure. And I'm glad that they sent you as representatives to provide our audience a little bit of extra insights and get to the bottom of some of the questions that they had.
Yeah, that was good. I have one thing that I want to say, and it was on the sheet. We had a wet spring
Yes.
in Iowa. I think Nebraska's had some moisture. I think out east especially. What is one thing that these drones can help us with in this growing season?
I think I'm going to give you 2 real quick.
Okay.
So
You
if
asked
it-
for one.
Well,
Sue.
what
have a
are
tough time
2? Okay,
narrowing
what are
down.
just some of the big stuff?
Oh, we're going to have to edit that out. Corey's going to say, what are 2 things?
The first application would be if you look at ponded areas. So is that actually gone? If corn sits underground, corn's a great example. If it's underground and it's 80 degrees, we've been in t-shirt weather for a lot of this spring, which is odd for April and May.
Yeah.
But as you get into this, are those areas not going to grow at all? Or are those plants unhealthy on the border that sat in water longer and the roots didn't breathe? So if that crop's not healthy, where do I go to replant? Can I get directly to that pocket if I need to? So the imagery drones could do a really good job of narrowing out where those are at to go back and find those spots or the flag like we talk kind of in the entryway when we come in. The other thing would be if those plants are alive and they may not be super healthy, but they look good at the time we take the imagery, does that mean those are the spots you go back and you need to put some more nitrogen on? You're gonna move the nitrogen cycle, and you're going to lose some of that in those areas where you're extra wet and you stay there. So can we go back and spot spray or apply, whether it's a drop with the dry spread or if it's something with a biological to help enhance that plant activity and the growth in those areas?
So it'd be like a urea, like a granular.
You could do a granular. I mean, it's a lot of weight to carry, but if you're looking at ponded areas, you're not looking
Yeah.
at a lot. But overall, if we stay kind of wet, you guys, even without the ponded areas, some of those acres need attention anyway.
Oh,
and
yeah.
they're not going to dry out. It's nice soil, but it's going to stay wet for a long time underneath that top.
What about replant? Can you put some beans out there if the corn's too tall?
I wondered about that. I keep
Yeah.
thinking, can you do a reel like you do like the pop guns?
Yeah.
Can you do a reel and run it out? That'd be
Yeah.
awesome. Maybe it's in our future.
Yeah.
Not yet.
I know planes have done beans before.
Yes.
You know, I remember the video that we originally saw when high-speed planting first came out, and it was saying how it throws the seed down into the trench. That's what it is. It's going to be like a machine gun of corn
That's
seed.
what I keep thinking on.
It
And then
just-
that gets your rows.
yeah.
Well, the props already force everything down, so you get like the crop shake.
You
I
may
mean,
not
it's just
get
the next
you
step.
may not get it as deep as you want, but you could get it there.
It depends on how wet it is.
That's true.
Yes. Yes.
Can it tell me where I need tile?
I
we
do
can do
think it's
waterlogging
depiction.
detection. I mean, we can
Okay.
show you where waterlogging is. So
It's all waterlogged right now.
Longer,
Well-
I was going to say,
100%.
that's the cool part. The longer we talk, the more application we come up with this.
I
So,
know.
Oh, yeah.
I say reach out to the folks at Terraplex. Go give them a shout out, check their websites out, and there might be a fit for you on your farm. So,
sounds great.
Thanks
Thanks
again.
for having us.
Yeah,
This has
thank
been
you.
a pleasure. It's always fun having people in the studio and
Oh, yeah.
getting to have a conversation before and after. But listeners, we appreciate you hanging out with us for this part. And so until next time, have a good one.